Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Brian Thatcher, and welcome to this episode of Mercy Unbound. It's a series that aims to provide hope, an avenue for healing, and one that will help you understand and then live the great mercy of God. With me today is Father Eric Weldon of the Diocese of Wichita. He and I met a few months ago as I spoke in his former parish, Sacred Heart in Colwich, Kansas. We had talked at the time about amazing events in our churches and history, and Father Capon from Kansas, but somehow we got on St. Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, and Father is going to share with us his thoughts on that today and how this all relates today. And but St. Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, putting it in perspective, he was just a young boy and had heroic faith. And
Right.
we need to step it up today as well. And he was born March 13th, 1913, and he died February 10th, 1928. So like Father Capon, we're talking about 100 years ago, but we're seeing some of these events play out again in today that were happening. And what I'm talking about was going on in Mexico at the time was anti-clerical laws, the persecution of the church, anti-religion, and it was a bad time to be a faith-filled person in Mexico, wasn't it, Father?
Yes, it was terrible. The revolution of 1910 had unleashed a terrible bloodshed. There was a lot of righteous anger with people who were been oppressed underneath the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz, who was dictator of Mexico from 1876 to 1910. He tried to hang on after 1910 for about one more year, and he couldn't do it. Nevertheless, when the lid comes off the pot and there's no order whatsoever at all, then there's going to be all sorts of bloodshed. And so power goes to the heads of a lot of different people who had a lot of different power and, armies underneath them. And then it was just tons of bloodshed from 1910 to 1916.
Now, a war broke out, basically a civil war against the government, faith-filled people, the rebels, they were called. It was called the Cristero War. Now, until I got to know about this young saint, many times throughout my life, living in different states and things, I go to prayer groups, etc., and you'd hear people, yell, Viva Cristo Rey. And I never really knew what it meant, long live Jesus Christ, but I didn't know the history behind it.
Right.
What does that really mean, and how did that tie in as a rally cry for these people?
Well, let's understand that there's been anti-clerical laws, which means laws against the Catholic Church in Mexico, definitely since 1857 with Benito Juarez. And what happened is even though Porfirio Diaz was a bad dictator, he just let them fall to the side and he didn't act on them at all. And then in the Constitution of 1917, there was explicit laws to crush the Catholic Church. And they were there on the books. And the question is who's going to enforce them? That's the issue. So in 1920, you have Calles becomes president, or 2024. Basically, it's Calles and Plutarco Calles and Obregon. And so they are the ones who are going to make these laws come to life. Here's an example. Anti-clerical law number 5, monastic vows are prohibited and monastic orders are prohibited. So they were shutting down convents. And then and religious orders are running for their lives and running to America. So for instance, the Carmelite Sisters of Our Lady of Los Angeles in Alhambra, California, they came up in 1927. They're running for their lives. Okay. So these laws are on the books in 1917, but they enacted them, they acted on them. Calles did in 1926. Okay. All right. So then all public worship outside of the church building is banned. No processions for Guadalupe, no Eucharistic processions, no pilgrimages to Santo Niño de Atocha, right? The child Jesus. No, none of this. It's terrible. All right. All religious bodies are denied the right to acquire, hold, administer real property or loans made on property all religious property is declared national property. I mean, it's fierce. All right. So then the next one, the federal government is empowered to exercise in matters of religious worship and external discipline, such intervention as law by an authorized, that is controlling how many priests, where those priests are assigned. That's on the books, but nobody enforces it until the mid 1920s. And they said, we're going to do it. And so when that happened, then the people rose up. They at first they did peacefully. They had boycotts. They had Catholic youth organizations for the entire nation or many parts of many states, and they did these things like the National League of the Defense of Religious Liberty, which becomes the Popular Union for Youth, which youth means like people in their 20s and 30s. And so you had these organizations that were all springing to life, but the boycotts didn't work because too many business owners would give in because they wanted to make money, and the boycotts were hurting them. I mean, there was a petition of 2 million people signed, and nothing was done, and the government wouldn't change its mind. I mean, it got bad. It got real bad.
Now, priests couldn't even wear their clerical robe.
Correct. Yeah, that would end. But it depends on where you lived in Mexico. All right. But to change 400 years of history, just like that, I mean, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it wouldn't happen without bloodshed.
And I'm thinking too, all the faith in Our Lady Guadalupe and the Mexican tradition with her. And a couple of years ago, I was speaking in Michigan, and a priest played the movie for me, For Greater Glory.
Oh yeah.
That was the first time I'd really ever seen any story of all this going on. I was just appalled and shocked that
I learned nothing, grade school, high school, college, nothing on the Mexican question of the 1920s. It was really quite sad because that's all Catholic education that I had. I didn't learn that till later on in the seminary, and then really on my own study when I had parishes with a lot of Mexicans in them.
Amazing.
Oh yeah.
You said this Viva Cristo Rey. I didn't know where that came from.
Right. And so those guys during that, as they're being martyred, I mean, priests, nuns, lay people, everybody, as they charge into battle, Viva Cristo Rey, and as they're being shot, Viva Cristo Rey. All right. I mean, as they're being killed, because they're asked, who lives? ¿Quién viva? ¿Qué viva? Who lives? And the answer they want is Mexico, or los federales, or el gobierno, or el estado, the state. And that's what they want. But the Christians, the Catholics, would shoot back Viva Cristo Rey. And often, Viva Nuestra Señora Guadalupe. They would throw that on too as well. All right.
So tell us about the story really of this little boy.
Well, Anacleto Gonzalez Flores, Jose Sanchez del Rio, I'm all confused here. Jose Sanchez del Rio was this boy who got involved with the Cristeros in a non-combatant way. He did not pick up weapons, which I think is helped in his cause for sainthood. But he is from Salhuayo in Michoacan, and he is considered like the youngest saint of the Cristiada. And that's what it's called in Spanish, La Cristiada. We call it the Cristero War. He is a flag bearer. He carries like a banner, and he is, personally devoted to Enrique Grostieta, who is the general commander of the Cristeros in the region where he's at in Jalisco and Michoacan, in that world. Okay. And so he's captured, and he's made an example of, such as the brutality and the hatred, So anyway, he is obviously very innocent, and I know ask me another question. Just take me further.
It's interesting. I believe his uncle, and who was his godfather,
right,
was part of the government.
He was the alcalde. He was a governor. No, he was like the mayor, and he's his uncle, and he's his godfather. And it's absolutely terrible. Pay no attention to that message, all right? It's absolutely terrible. And it's I mean, his governor, the movie does take the correct poetic license in showing him betraying his nephew, his godchild, in front of everybody. I mean, it's very clear. And that is what he did. He betrayed him. Now, the boy, it's not in the movie. The boy has an uncle, another uncle, who is a Jesuit priest who's in the hillsides hiding out. And that uncle celebrates Mass, of course, and has a Eucharist and smuggles it inside a hollowed out roll or bread, puts the Eucharist inside that. And maybe I think a little girl, she takes it in there. You know, you get somebody's innocent and, you know, who's going to challenge her. So she takes it into where Jose Sanchez is holed up or be imprisoned, like in a barn. And so she takes it into him so he can have the Eucharist. So that's powerful. So when he's finally killed and made an example of, I mean, he is tortured. He's beaten, of course, and everything that goes along with that, and all the yelling and the screaming and all the, you know, forcing him to deny the faith. And I mean, here's a child. They can't break this child. And so they lay him out and they slice open his feet, the soles of his feet. And then they make him walk through town. And he has to walk through town to get to his place of execution. And so they're making him an example. So it's his own personal way to the cross. It's his dying and shedding of his blood for the sake of religious freedom. And so he, when he is asked to recant and to say, like, que viva la revolución, or like, long live the revolution, he responds, viva Cristo Rey, excuse me, and then he's shot. So.
And didn't his uncle plead with him as the government official, you know, all you have to do is renounce Jesus and you can live.
Right. There is definitely that came into play. All you have to do is renounce your faith and you get to live.
And at that young age of 14, he saw what lies ahead. And I remember there was someone he had watched be killed, and he said something to the effect of, you know, you're going to go before me, prepare a place in heaven for me. I mean, the incredible faith of this boy. Yeah,
in the movie, they portray him visualizing from a distance the death of the old priest who had mercy on him and took him in as an altar server and, you know, helped him out. So it was a powerful witness, you know, and it was played by Peter O'Toole in the movie, which is really, really fun.
Yeah, I'd suggest to anybody watching this or listening to the podcast, track down and get that movie For Greater Glory. It really was touching.
Shadow of a doubt.
It gives a great aspect of history, like you said, none of us know. And
no, we don't know it, and we don't understand. I think Americans, we become so numb. We can be just as godless as communists because the persecution that we endure is not soldiers bolting down a door or barring up the church or tearing it down, or priests being escorted out of town and taken to a concentration camp to die, which happens right now in Chinese communist world and other parts of the world. But what happens for us is a very insidious, slowly, drip by drip, whittling away at our faith, and most people agree to it because most Americans are enslaved to comfort. And I'm going to feel uncomfortable, and it'll be a little embarrassing to stand up for the faith. Meanwhile, we have an attack on religious freedom. So as we spoke about in the other episode with Father Capon, you know, he stood up to socialist communism with the Chinese communists, the dignity of the human person and freedom. And here we have Jose Sanchez del Rio, almost 30 years before, maybe like 26 years before, he is standing up to a regime that totally attacks religious freedom. And what do we need to protect against in our nation right now is religious freedom, because we're losing our religious freedom, the freedom of religion. And it's for those who hate God, Christ, and especially the Catholic Church, and any of our other brothers and sisters out there of other Christian organizations and ecclesial communities out there who stand up for Christ, they are hated as well. And we had a president just a few years, 2 terms ago, who said that he all supported, like President Obama said, we'll support freedom of worship, which means you can do whatever you want inside the walls of your church, I don't care, but it can't go anywhere else. That's what that means. And you must agree to what we want to inflict upon this nation. And that's what's happened. It's been slow.
Right. I even think of the abortion issue. You know, we've gone all the way from abortion in instances of rape and incest to killing a baby who's 5 seconds away from being a full-term healthy baby. And
Right.
we don't even see that as a problem. And people are afraid to stand up. It's like you see all the time, you read all the time, people getting mugged, people getting shot, people getting in accidents, people are injured, and people didn't even jump in to help. And it's
Right.
that silence, it's that not standing up.
Our entire society has been formed in a toleration and an acceptance of evil, which this has its roots in something like abortion. Not like abortion, but in abortion. So 1973, nationwide. And so because you can exterminate life like that at any time, then there's this toleration for evil. And the human person is denied the dignity of the human person. That everybody everybody was a child in the womb. Everybody was a zygote. And it's become a non-entity, a piece of property. That's why abortion is so likened to slavery, where the human person is denied his or her human dignity. And so therefore, we see that as well with abortion. It is my property to dispose of. And nobody wants to say that this has informed our society to accept evil.
And people, you hear this often, well, I'm personally against abortion, but who am I to say? You know, it's like killing of the Jews in Nazi Germany. Well, I don't think that's right, but who am I? You know, I'm silent, I'm quiet.
Right, yeah. I'm not going to put anybody on a train, doctor. I'm not going to put them on a train but well, who am I to stop the police from shutting down the Jewish bakery? I mean, what can I really do about that? I mean, I'm not going to put them on a train, but I'm not in charge. And that's the world we live in.
And I'm paraphrasing this poem or quote to the effect of, when they came for the Jews, I said nothing. When they came for the priests, because I think people don't know that, millions of Catholics and priests and religious people were killed in World War II. The Nazis hated religion. And, but I did nothing. And they came for the gypsies and the gays. I did nothing. And then they came for me and there was nobody left.
Right. Right. And that's right. We have to remember that, 13 million people died in the concentration camps, the death camps, and half were Jews. So, the half were everybody else. Okay. So, I know stories of, religious sisters, Catholic sisters. They told me how their order, which came from Germany, how young girls would get on the train to go to the convent in the late 1930s, and they never show up.
Yeah.
Things like that.
You mentioned your comment on the young girl bringing the Saint Jose Luis the Eucharist. I read somewhere that they had nicknamed him, the Cristeros had nicknamed him Tarcisius, which goes back to the 3rd century. Did you read anything on that?
Well, yeah, Tarcisius was what you might call today like an acolyte. He would take the Eucharist from the bishop to his presbyters, which were maybe in a very nearby town. We can't think of a diocese in the early church like Wyoming. Okay, that's crazy. That's crazy. You have, or Arkansas, one bishop for the whole shooting match, right? Nuts. So you would have these towns that all have these overseers, episcopoi, and they'd have the Eucharist. And so what it was is to show your union with that bishop. The bishop would fraction the bread. He would break the bread, take a particle, and send it out there to a presbyter, to a priest, who would include it in his Eucharist. And so Tarcisius, he does the same. And so he's jumped, by some, I guess, I don't know, Roman thugs or something. And they want to know what he's got. It's some shiny object, and he's inside there is the Eucharist, and he's taking that, transporting the Eucharist, and he's killed. He gives his life to protect the Eucharist. So it's similar to Saint Jose Sanchez del Rio, and it's wonderful. It just shows you the deep culture of faith, and how here you are with peasant Mexicans, campesinos que están llenos de Espíritu Santo, like they're these farm people who are filled with the Holy Spirit, and they have an awareness of Saint Tarcisius. To call him that, and it's powerful.
Behind me is the image of the Divine Mercy, and of course, the same Jesus in this image is the same Jesus in the Eucharist. So Tarcisius and the young saint were really intertwined in their deep love, and they were young boys. It's amazing. And the difference was, 1700 years, but with God, there's no time, so to speak.
Right.
And they're Christian brothers with a deep
right.
And
we could compare. When you compare that, you could compare Mother Angelica to probably more like Saint Bridget of Sweden. Although Mother Angelica was never married and had kids like Saint Bridget of Sweden did, but Saint Bridget of Sweden, she laid it down hard and truthful, just like Mother Angelica used to.
Interesting.
God raises up.
Now, what was the miracle that led to the canonization of the young saint? Was it what I read was that it was a mother with an infant in the same hometown as the saint.
Oh, Salguayo?
Yeah, and the baby got meningitis and tuberculosis and pneumonia, and the doctor said there was a 90% certainty chance of being brain dead. And they all prayed to Saint Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, and the baby had an incredible recovery and woke up smiling. And all the doctors said there was no hope for this child at all. And I thought that was interesting.
There it is. There it is, a similarity that there is a young person, 14-year-old saint, and youth, all coming together.
I think of the Blessed Mother watching Jesus on the road to Calvary, and how painful that must have been. And I can only imagine the pain of the parents of this young boy, watching him have his own Via Dolorosa, as you said.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
The pain.
Yeah. And that does give us strength. It does give us confidence when you read about the sufferings that other people endured, and it's like, I don't know how they did that. And it's like, they did not do it. What they were open to is the love of Christ. And what was more powerful is that they did not want to be separated from the love of Jesus Christ. And that's what it was.
There's a saying, God never gives you more than you can handle. But I don't like that. I don't like that one. I prefer to say, God never gives you more than the two of you can handle, because it's obvious this young man's focus was on Jesus.
Right.
I remember him saying something to the effect to his mother, "Don't let me lose this opportunity to get to heaven."
Right. She
but
wanted, yeah, she was like, she was probably, she didn't want him to go off and hang out with them, She did not want that to happen.
and we think of today's culture, we're so focused on the materialism and the pleasures of life and the fast lane and the American dream that we kind of forget. Man, this
Yeah,
life goes by real quick, doesn't it?
sure, it does, yeah. Um, it does go by quick. Sometimes it's not pessimistic. I'm not being pessimistic, but it's like people love to say God gives you never more than you can handle. Well, which is another way of saying God's grace is going to get you through it. Well, I would almost say God is always giving you more than you can handle, but he's going to give you the grace to get through it, and hopefully the wisdom to discern what needs to be done.
Just even how evil these people were, though, just to cut his feet and then make him walk. In the movie, I don't know if it's true, but I believe he had to walk through, glass and things.
Oh yeah, yeah. You cut him up walking through the glass, and he's not walking down pavement. He's walking down cobblestone streets, stuff like that. So very, very hard on the feet. The saint, the person who suffered or was healed through the intercession of Saint Jose Sanchez, was a little girl who was on life support, I think, who was from Sahuayo, and then later on, she's 8 years old. She's in St. Peter's Square with the Holy Father. But she's born in the same town, and she has a miracle, and she's total innocent little girl. I mean, infant. And so.
But it's unusual for children like Saint Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio to be canonized at such a young age, isn't it? I mean, that's not the norm.
It doesn't, it doesn't seem like the norm today, does it? In this day and age. But we see it all the time throughout history, centuries ago. I mean, and also if you look at the last 200 years, I mean, who does the Blessed Virgin Mary talk to? I mean, 3 little kids at Fatima, Bernadette, okay? St. Joan of Arc was 19, no first communion. Bernadette, no first communion. And neither the kids at Fatima. So it is amazing that maybe we don't see that so much anymore, but maybe we're not looking. Okay, but certainly he is that great miracle of faith in front of us, and he just didn't do. I mean, he didn't do that in a peaceful moment. Here's kind of a connection for the two saints we've been talking about in these 2 episodes. Capon grew up in an austere life, not oppressive, not violent, but just simple. I mean, when it was cold, he was cold. When it was raining, he was wet. When it was hot, he was hot. He's a farm kid, before the cultural comforts we all take for granted today. But he was proven in the crucible of suffering. Whereas here's a little boy who could have laid low. He could have just gone into hiding with his mother and other people, but he decided to join up with those men, because he didn't know what to do. I mean, what do I do? I mean, he holds the horse for somebody, he carries a banner, he does nothing really else. He's the stable boy. He's not a general. He's not going out there and getting all these things done, or writing tomes or preaching or anything like that. He's just being a good boy. And then in the crucible of the moment of decision, he comes to the fore with the grace of God, and he clings to the love he's had since he's a child. And even what's nice about the movie is that they portray the mystery of that love. It's not always able to be understood by his parents, but they accept it. And they're accepting an innocence and a goodness with that. Anyway, so I think that there's a similarity there.
Any comments on the general? Who was he, or what was he like?
Oh, and Enrique Grostieta had fought in the Revolutionary Wars, about a decade earlier. And he had since been out of the army and not doing that anymore. He was not a practicing Catholic at all, probably an atheist, probably an agnostic, like a lazy atheist. His wife was living the faith, raising the daughters, and he was he had his own factory and his own life. And the Cristeros went looking for him because they needed somebody to organize. They needed somebody to make it happen. But he says, "I am not a Christian. I'm not supporting this. I'm not a Christian. I'm not living their Catholic faith." But he did believe in freedom. He did believe in freedom enough. And I think that was portrayed well in the movie. But he certainly was not, a confessor to the faith. But he certainly was a believer in freedom and human dignity. And in that, he supported them. And in that, they just needed somebody to take the reins. And so he was a great example of that, if that makes sense.
But he was killed at the end also, wasn't
Yeah, he died in combat. He died before the war got out. His wife had to go into hiding.
he? And she was a devout Catholic, though, wasn't she?
Definitely she was a devout Catholic. He now must understand that Gros Dieto was about defending religious liberty, libertad religiosa, which means religious freedom, because he's about freedom. And you can't live under an oppressive regime. So I think he said, it is not the episcopate that should solve the problem, but the Cristero National Guard. It is a religious liberty problem, not a religious one, if you can distinguish the difference. So the Cristeros have been constituted to defend all liberties. So its vitality must be ascribed to the fact that it represents the people in a genuine manner, in a large manner.
Right,
if they're going to defend the religious liberty of these Catholics, then they're defending the freedom of everybody and this religious freedom they all need to have.
And that's really important today, though, isn't it? I mean, we're seeing the same things play out.
Right, exactly. So, and just to know, Gros Dieto was killed in late May 1929 in Jalisco, going to Michoacan, which is Zahuallo, all right, where the boy was from. It is playing out today. Christians have strange friends at times, peculiar friends. Constantine was not a Catholic his whole life until the very end, but he granted religious freedom. So we could even say that a president, we don't vote for angels, a president with all their positives and negatives, if they will allow for protect religious freedom, which we have in the Constitution, if they'll allow for that and let it grow and let it live the way it's supposed to be, according to our founders, then that is an ally, because they believe in freedom. But we have an increasing number of elected persons who do not believe in freedom. They do not. And so they are opposed to those people who claim to have a source of freedom that is greater than their own. And that's the world we live in at the moment in the United States. All right.
And yet we can learn from St. Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, and history repeats itself.
Yes, it does repeat itself. It is the small witnesses from the corners of the country or the deep recesses that are not noticed in the news, that are not spoken about publicly, are the ones that will inspire hearts in years to come. I mean, we'll have to remember that in the first 4 centuries or the first 3 centuries of Christianity, I mean, there wasn't, a proclamation in the town square about a Christian who gave his life for the cause. No, they didn't care. They were just, some weird attraction in some coliseum or some circus in some town, to
For the
break,
day.
to break up the monotony of
Right.
somebody being killed. So today, the people who are living the faith and trying to be just good people who know of God or truly live the Christian faith, they're not going to be celebrated at all. They're not going to be celebrated and talked about, but they are being faithful and they are changing the corner of the world in which they live.
Well, and I just kind of closed today's show with, again, what the young saint told his mother: do not let me lose the opportunity to gain heaven so easily. And
Yes.
persevere, and we do our best. We let God do the rest. Father, I want to thank you again for joining me on today's show of Mercy Unbound on St. Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio. And people, you can watch the show at drbrianthatcher.com, listen to the podcast at the same, or on all the mediums. Please subscribe, share with your friends and contacts, and let's help get the truth out. The truth will set us free. One of my favorite quotes of Martin Luther King: darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can. So we speak the truth in love, and may God bless each and every one of you. And thank you again for joining me and Father Eric today on Mercy Unbound. Thanks again, Father.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Thatcher. It's great. Good to be with you.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video portion. The podcast can be heard at anchor.fm/Dr. Brian, Bryan Thatcher, Thatcher, and on all the major podcast forums. I would love to speak at your church or conference, and please consider supporting our efforts to spread the truth to a hurting world. Thank you again. And for more information, go to the website at drbrianthatcher.com.